The fire had just reached the attic when Karen started screaming, not because of the flames licking her porch swing, but because she'd realized too late whose house she'd just tried to foreclose. "Yep, that's me." The guy standing calmly in the yard while the HOA's prized records went up in smoke. "You're probably wondering how we got here. Well, it all started with a 3 fine and a secret I'd been keeping for years. They foreclosed on my house over a 3 fine. You think I'm exaggerating, but I've still got the notice. It's been laminated now, mostly so it doesn't get stained by the barbecue sauce I slather on ribs while sitting in a lawn chair 20 feet from the smoldering wreckage that used to be our HOA headquarters." Yep, that's what they set ablaze in the chaos, not realizing the fire was only going to illuminate every single skeleton they'd stuffed in their walk-in closet of corruption. But let's rewind. This didn't start with fire. It started with a stupid, measly, bureaucratic speck of a fine, $3. Not for uncut grass, not for loud music, not for leaving a toilet on the lawn like Doug did when he renovated his guest bathroom. Mine was for an administrative processing delay on an auto-drafted HOA fee. The payment had gone through just a few hours past the deadline due to a glitch in the HOA's payment portal. But Karen Mitchell didn't care. Karen, our HOA president and self-declared community integrity officer, was the kind of woman who wore pearls to trash collection day. She would inspect mailboxes for paint chips and once fined a war veteran for overly patriotic 4th of July decor. I still remember unfolding that violation notice on a Monday morning, sipping lukewarm coffee as I stood barefoot on my porch. "Failure to pay HOA dues in full, 3 balance unpaid." I chuckled. $3? I thought it was a joke. That same day, I submitted the payment and went on with my life, never suspecting that Karen had other plans. Weeks passed. I thought it was resolved, but I started getting more letters. One for a 27 late penalty, another for a 62 reassessment processing surcharge. Then came the 119 non-compliance processing administration lien preparation fee. I called the HOA office. Margaret, the board receptionist, gave me the same robotic answer every time. "It's all outlined in Section 9B of the compliance guidelines. Would you like to schedule a hearing?" A hearing. Over $3. I tried to be diplomatic. I mailed certified checks. I emailed. I even called Karen directly once. She never answered. Then one Thursday morning, I opened my front door and found a folded white paper rubber banded to the doorknob. "Notice of foreclosure proceedings," just like that. No court summons, no hearing date. Just a cold printed paragraph. "Due to persistent non-payment and breach of HOA compliance, your property will be scheduled for foreclosure auction under Article 7.2 of the Sunrise Oaks HOA Charter." I stood there, stunned. My dog, Ranger, barked in the background as if he already knew we were under siege. The fine, inflated by Karen's crusade, had snowballed into a multi-$1,000 legal contraption. They claimed I owed over $200 now, all starting from that original $3 hiccup. I didn't fight it, not at first. That's what people don't understand. I didn't storm into a board meeting. I didn't hire a lawyer. I didn't even yell. I let it ride. I let Karen think she'd won, because sometimes, when someone thinks they've got the upper hand, they'll climb so high on their paper throne, they forget how far there is to fall. Let me tell you something about Karen. She loved her power. She'd cruise through the neighborhood in her pearl-white golf cart, clipboard on her lap, snapping pictures of violations like a dictator with an Instagram addiction. She had the board in her pocket. 5 members, all longtime residents who owed her favors or feared her retribution. I knew the vote was coming. Unpaid assessments, continued non-responsiveness, egregious violation of HOA values, that's how she framed it in the monthly minutes. They voted unanimously to foreclose. 5 hands went up. Karen didn't raise hers, she just smirked and said, "Carried." I watched from the back row, didn't say a word, just nodded, thanked them, and left. They had no idea who I really was. What Karen and her clipboard brigade didn't know was that I'd been buying property in the community for the last 8 years. Quietly, patiently. I wasn't born rich. Grew up in a rental with carpet that never stopped smelling like wet dog. But my old man taught me to save, invest, wait. After the Navy, I used the GI Bill to get a degree in business, then worked construction until I could afford my first flip. Bought low, sold high, always under different LLCs. Each home I purchased, I placed in a unique shell company with innocuous names: Cypress Holdings, Franklin Meadow Properties, Sunbelt Ridge Partners. No one suspected they were all me. I started with one property across the street, then another 2 down by the pond, then 4 in the newer phase by the golf course. I bought homes that were about to be foreclosed, scooped up short sales during the 2008 slump, even bought a couple off-market from retirees looking to downsize, and I held them. Didn't flip. Just rented to good folks, fixed the plumbing, kept the lawns trimmed, all under the radar. By the time Karen signed that foreclosure paperwork on my personal residence, I owned 51% of the land in the development, not the homes, the land beneath them. Through various arrangements, every board member lived in a property on soil I legally controlled. Most had no clue. The real estate was tied up in so many property trusts and shell leases, they didn't bother checking who their landlords were. That was the first rule of my game: stay invisible. Let them get comfortable. Let Karen keep raising her gavel and clinking wine glasses at her community unity luncheons. The day after the foreclosure was finalized, I packed a single duffel bag and walked Ranger out the door. The neighbors watched from their bay windows, some smug, some sympathetic. I waved. Got in my truck. Drove 2 miles down the road to a small duplex I owned under Cordell Properties. While the HOA prepared to auction off my own home, I sat quietly, collecting rent from a dozen properties. I didn't retaliate, not yet. I reviewed the bylaws, met with my attorney, prepared the documents, collected every photo Karen had ever taken, every citation, every recorded board meeting where she used precedent to justify her power trips. I made a spreadsheet titled, "Oh Karen, Violations and Vendettas," and cross-referenced every fine she'd ever issued with the property ownership logs. The pattern was obvious. Anyone who challenged her was bled dry. Selective enforcement, conflict of interest, retaliatory fines, misuse of funds, and now, abuse of foreclosure powers. All of it documented, all of it ready. But I wasn't going to file a lawsuit. No, that would be giving her what she wanted, a fight. Instead, I'd wait, let her win, let her move into my house like I knew she would. It wasn't a guess. I overheard her gloating at the next board meeting. We'll stage the auction so no one else bids, then transfer ownership to one of our LLCs, flip it in 6 months, make the HOA a tidy profit. She didn't realize the auctioneer she hired was one of my renters, nor that her LLC, Horizon Future Group, had been on my radar for 2 years as one of the HOA's questionable beneficiaries. She thought she was running the show. She had no idea she'd just declared war on her landlord. The HOA building was a squat, beige box with pretensions of grandeur, arched faux stone columns, tinted glass doors, and a flagpole out front flying the HOA flag right beneath Old Glory. Karen called it the heart of Sunrise Oaks, said it in every monthly newsletter like it was trademarked. She loved that place. Loved to stand at the top of the short brick steps like a suburban queen holding court, arms folded over her clipboard while the board members nodded beside her like obedient dukes. "This is what we've built," she told new residents during orientation. "A strong community with strong leadership, and now a strong foundation." That last line always made me smile. Because the only thing strong about that foundation was the lease it sat on and the fact that I owned the dirt under it. She just didn't know it yet. Let me back up. The Sunrise Oaks HOA headquarters sat on parcel 311B, a narrow strip of land that had once been a utilities access easement back when the neighborhood was first developed. It had been written off in county records as commercially zoned but undesirable due to flooding issues. 10 years ago, I bought it at auction for a pittance through a trust called Fulton Pines Development. Spent about $6,000 clearing the title, another $2,000 in legal fees, and forgot about it, until Karen, in her infinite brilliance, convinced the board to centralize operations into one building. She found an old leasing office from a defunct real estate firm and had the HOA sign a 20-year lease through a property management company. That company, Oak Bend Equity Holdings, which, of course, was mine. LLCs stacked like nesting dolls. Karen was renting her power palace from me. I collected her checks every month. She even negotiated the lease with one of my attorneys, never realizing who was really behind the curtain. I watched her pose for pictures in front of the glass doors during the grand opening, shaking hands with the mayor's assistant and holding one of those oversized fake scissors like she was cutting the ribbon on a new hospital wing. The article in the town circular called her a visionary steward of community resources. I clipped it and taped it to my fridge, right next to a magnet that read, Landlord noun, one who collects rent from delusion. It wasn't just the office. No. The real move was the homes. Quietly, over the years, I'd bought not just houses, but parcels, little forgotten corners of Sunrise Oaks. Back lots, rear easements, half-acre strips behind cul-de-sacs. But the key was the leasebacks. You see, developers often split homeownership from land rights to reduce liability. Homeowners think they own everything, but in dozens of cases, their property lines stop at the slab. The ground underneath? Leased, often forgotten in the fine print. The HOA didn't notice that when they moved their board members into new developments, many of those model homes were built on leased lots. Over time, I acquired a majority of those leases. I now owned 51% of the land under every HOA board member's home. Karen's house, with its triple-gabled roof and aggressively symmetrical hedges, built on parcel 29F, leased from Willow Bend Trust. That's me, Steve, the treasurer, with his 4-car garage and poorly hidden boat. Parcel 16C, leased from Barton Holdings LLC. Also me. I wasn't their neighbor, I was their landlord. They just didn't know it yet. Why? Why go through all this trouble, this secrecy, this long con? Because of my father. That's why. The man worked his whole life laying tile and pouring driveways. Saved up, bought a modest home with a yard big enough to park his truck, lived quiet, paid his dues. Then, one day, our HOA at the time decided his wheelchair ramp for Mom was an unapproved modification. They fined him $400, then $800. Then they started issuing weekly penalties. One afternoon, they posted a lien on our front door while Mom was inside recovering from surgery. A year later, they foreclosed. We lost the house. I remember sitting on the curb beside my dad as the movers hauled out our furniture, tears running down his face, not from sadness but from shame. He said one thing to me, "Son, they're bullies, and the only way to beat a bully is to own the ground he's standing on." I never forgot that. So I started young. First job I got, I saved every cent, bought my first property at 22, got laughed at by realtors who thought I was flipping to make a quick buck. I wasn't. I was building an empire, one hidden deed at a time. Over the years, I learned how to make LLCs disappear into trusts, how to route ownership through tax shelters, how to make it all perfectly legal but practically untraceable. Sunrise Oaks was my masterpiece. I waited. For years. Let the board grow fat and happy. Let Karen build her kingdom on my dirt. Let her taste her own importance until it was ripe for harvest. Then I struck. It started with letters. Not loud ones. Not legal threats. Just routine notices. One to the HOA office, addressed to Tenant Representative 311, B. Standard language. Due to a reassessment of property taxes and rising insurance premiums, your monthly lease will increase by 6.8% beginning next quarter. Karen read that one at a board meeting and scoffed. "They're lucky we don't just move," she said, not realizing I owned the only other commercially zoned parcel in the development too. Then came the notices to individual board members. Personalized, courteous, firm. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, this letter serves as a reminder that the land lease agreement associated with Parcel 42A, as defined in your homeowner title transfer, is subject to periodic review. Please remit updated lease documentation within 30 days, or risk termination of tenancy. You'd be amazed how many of them didn't even know they were tenants. Karen was first. She called the number on the notice, furious. Got my attorney. She demanded a meeting. My lawyer smiled and said, "Of course, Ms. Mitchell. The leaseholder will reach out directly." So I did. I showed up at her door in a suit and tie. She looked confused at first. Thought I was there to discuss landscaping or maybe a water bill. Then I handed her the letterhead from Fulton Pines Development. Her eyes scanned the page, stopped, scanned again. "You?" she said. I nodded. "Me." She tried to bluster, threatened legal action. Told me she'd go to the county. I reminded her that the lease was valid, her rent was 6 months behind, and that if she didn't like it, she was welcome to vacate the land. "You can keep the house," I said. "I just want the ground." She turned pale, slammed the door. 2 hours later, Steve got his letter, then Margaret, then Richard. One by one, the dominoes fell. I didn't raise the rent yet. That wasn't the point. The point was the power. They'd ruled from the top for years. Now they were standing in a house of cards on a foundation I could pull from beneath them with one phone call. Karen tried to retaliate. Called an emergency board meeting. Said I was coercing the HOA. Tried to draft a motion to evict me from the neighborhood. I sat in the front row, sipping coffee. Then I passed a single manila envelope to the secretary. Inside, copies of the lease agreements for the office and 5 board member properties, all current, all signed, all ironclad. The motion died before it could be seconded. Karen's hands trembled as she gripped her gavel. I smiled politely. "Madam President," I said, "I believe we're overdue for a rent discussion." It wasn't about money anymore. It was about letting them know the ground they strutted on was borrowed. That every smug glance, every clipboard fine, every smug smirk from a vinyl porch swing now had a price. And I'd be the one collecting. The tenant notices would keep coming. The walls of Karen's little empire were starting to creak. She just hadn't realized yet that the foundation wasn't cracking. It was being pulled out from underneath her, inch by inch, signature by signature, from the landlord she never saw coming. The eviction notice was printed on heavy cream-colored paper, legal grade, embossed letterhead, no threats, no exclamation points. Just cold, factual language that hit harder than any screaming match could. Notice of termination of lease for non-payment, parcel 311B. The Sunrise Oaks HOA had exactly 30 days to vacate their beloved headquarters or cure the rent they'd unknowingly defaulted on. The amount owed? $14,622.17. Not outrageous, but enough to rattle them. The cherry on top? I hand-delivered the envelope during one of Karen's Wednesday morning leadership circles. Her little gatherings where she lectured the board on community enhancement strategy while sipping imported tea and handing out laminated agenda cards. I walked in, set the envelope on the podium, and left without a word. Behind me, I heard the paper slide across the table, and then silence. The kind that falls when someone realizes the chessboard they've been playing on isn't theirs. Karen didn't scream. Not immediately. She didn't even move. She just stared at the envelope like it was ticking. Then she excused herself, marched straight to her office, and slammed the door. By that afternoon, she was waist-deep in county archives. I know, because I had a contact at the record clerk's desk who texted me a photo. Karen Mitchell, unshowered, furious, flipping through zoning maps with red-rimmed eyes. Over the next 72 hours, she filed 8 separate records requests. Property lines, transfer deeds, trust paperwork. She subpoenaed records that no one had touched since the housing bubble burst. And somewhere around hour 15, it finally clicked. The LLC names, the leasing documents, the trust formations. She saw the pattern. She traced the shell companies. She followed the paper trail. And then she saw my name. Just once. Buried inside a 2016 trustee affidavit for a holding company that had purchased a commercial lot from the city for $1 as part of an urban revitalization initiative. The very lot the HOA now occupied. She must have read it 10 times, trying to find a loophole, a way to erase it. But the ink was dry, the deal was legal, the rent was overdue, and the landlord was me. That's when she cracked. By the weekend, the community was buzzing. Did you hear the HOA might be evicted? Karen's hiding something. Why would she sign a 20-year lease without knowing who owns the land? At first, she tried to control the narrative. Sent out a mass email titled, "Important Updates Regarding the HOA Office Space." It claimed, miscommunications regarding lease documentation and unfortunate administrative oversights. She called the eviction a regrettable misunderstanding with an anonymous corporate landlord. She still hadn't admitted it. Was me. But I gave her no time to spin. That Sunday, I hosted a public rent auction on the same parcel. That's right, I set up chairs, invited food trucks, printed flyers that read, "Commercial lease opportunity, prime HOA office building, flexible terms, open bidding, community welcome." Neighbors came out in droves. Some thought it was a joke, others brought lawn chairs. Karen showed up halfway through, flanked by 2 board members, looking like she'd swallowed glass. "This is illegal," she hissed. "You can't evict a community institution." I handed her a folder with the default ledger. "You can pay up," I said, "or outbid the others." She stormed off, but the board was shaken, especially Steve, the treasurer, who started doing math on a napkin. "Wait, if we owe 14 grand," he whispered to Margaret, "and we've been paying Elite Landscaping 3 times that just for hedges, then—" The cracks were forming. I could see it in their eyes. Steve was sweating, Margaret looked pale, and Karen? She was unraveling. That evening, during a closed-door emergency board session, the yelling could be heard through the windows. I sat on the curb, sipping lemonade. One neighbor passed by and asked, "You hear what's going on?" I smiled. "Yeah, every word." The next day they tried to buy me out. Karen's husband, a podiatrist with a superiority complex and hair that didn't quite match his age, showed up at my office with an envelope. "Karen wants to resolve this quietly," he said. "We're prepared to offer you 80,000 for the land, in full, clean title, no hard feelings." I laughed. "Tell Karen the price went up." "By how much?" he asked. "By however many sleepless nights she's had since Tuesday. Call it 200,000. His jaw tightened. He left without shaking my hand. That night, Karen called an emergency community meeting, open to the public. That's when the gloves came off. She opened the meeting like a press conference. "There has been an orchestrated attempt to destabilize our HOA," she declared. "Certain parties are using legal technicalities to sow division." She called me a malicious actor. Said I was undermining community unity. Said I was weaponizing bureaucracy. I stood in the back of the room, hands in my pockets, letting her dig her grave. But then it happened. During the QA, Steve, bless his greedy, guilt-ridden heart, stood up. "Karen," he said, voice shaking, "did you know that 3 of the board homes sit on land leased from this same guy?" The room gasped. "Because I just found the paperwork," he continued. "You didn't tell us, you didn't tell anyone, and now we're all liable." Karen turned to him slowly, like he just farted during a funeral. "Steve, sit down," she snapped. "You knew about this." "No," he said, louder now. "I didn't. And you told me the lease had a purchase option. It doesn't. You lied." That's when Margaret chimed in. "Karen, how long have you known this?" Karen's face was a mask of rage. "This is not the time." "It's exactly the time," someone shouted from the crowd. And that was it, like a dam breaking. Neighbors started shouting. Someone demanded a financial audit. Someone else waved a copy of the lease. A retired teacher yelled, "My dues paid for your damn office furniture." One of the junior board members tried to restore order, banging a gavel that wasn't even his. A man in the back stood up and said, "I'm starting a petition to remove the board," Karen shouted. "This meeting is adjourned." But no one listened. The board had splintered. Factions were forming. Friendships collapsing. Margaret walked out. Steve tossed his badge on the table and followed her. Even the HOA secretary, who once cried during Karen's birthday speech, stood up and left without a word. And then it got worse. 2 days later, someone leaked the internal board documents. I don't know who did it, okay? Maybe I do, but let's pretend I don't. The leak included expense spreadsheets showing Karen had authorized over 40,000 in strategic aesthetic enhancements paid to her cousin's company. It included emails where she admitted to targeting problem homeowners with strategic fines. It showed the board discussing how to reduce visibility of certain budget items before the annual meeting. Local reporters picked it up. The community Facebook group exploded. The comment section was a war zone. By Friday, Karen's lawn had been egged, twice. The last time I saw her that week, she was standing in front of the HOA building, arms crossed, staring at the for-lease sign I'd posted on the front lawn. Someone had drawn devil horns on her portrait on the community bulletin board. She didn't look furious anymore, just tired. Like a queen whose army had fled the castle, realizing the peasants were coming with torches, and the landlord held the deed to the moat. The board wasn't just cracking. It was burning. It should have ended there, really. The leak, the shouting, the board collapse, but Karen never knew when to quit. Even as her empire was crumbling, her porch plants wilted, and the community newsletter was reduced to a single passive-aggressive Facebook post from a burner account, she still showed up to meetings wearing her red power blazer like nothing had changed. That's the thing about people like Karen. They don't stop until the last brick is pried from their little castle, until every ounce of control is scraped from their cold, clenched fists. So when I posted the final eviction notice on the HOA office door, she didn't just panic, she retaliated, with a plan so hilariously desperate it still makes me laugh. She invoked eminent domain. I swear on my grandfather's wrench set, the woman tried to seize my land, the very dirt beneath her HOA headquarters, by claiming it was essential public infrastructure. I got the letter on a Tuesday, sealed in a crisp manila envelope, notarized with what I later confirmed was a stamp from her husband's cousin. It read, "Due to the strategic importance of the HOA headquarters in serving the greater public good, the Sunrise Oaks HOA hereby asserts land acquisition via eminent domain. Compensation to be determined at a later date." I nearly choked on my coffee. Karen Mitchell, the same woman who fined old man Rodriguez, 75, for planting sunflowers instead of HOA-approved begonias, was trying to federal seize private land, my land, and all without even understanding what eminent domain actually required. So I did what any good landlord with a grudge and a legal Rolodex would do. I called the Department of Justice. Now, I wasn't bluffing. My cousin Angela worked as senior counsel at the DOJ's property division. She owed me a favor for getting her son into my rental after his internship fell through. I explained the situation, sent over the documents. Within 24 hours, she issued an official federal response, complete with letterhead, stamps, and language that might as well have been carved in granite. The letter opened with, "This HOA's claim to eminent domain is both procedurally invalid and constitutionally absurd. I had it framed. I hand-delivered a copy to Karen myself." She didn't take it well. A final emergency board meeting was called that Friday. It was meant to clarify community leadership status and reaffirm administrative rights. But everyone knew what it really was: Karen's last stand. The room was packed. Board members who hadn't shown their faces in weeks sat stiffly in folding chairs. Curious residents crowded the back wall, whispering behind their hands. Karen stood at the podium, red lipstick perfectly applied, voice calm but eyes wild. "There has been an egregious overstep of power," she said. "An attempt to dismantle our beloved community structure. But the HOA will not be bullied by private actors seeking to sow chaos and undermine order." Then I stepped forward. "Private actor, reporting for duty," I said, raising my hand like I was in Sunday school. I passed copies of the DOJ letter to the board, to the audience, even to the janitor, who gave me a thumbs up and kept sweeping. "Eminent domain," I continued, "is a function of government, not a tool for disgraced neighborhood bureaucrats trying to save their clubhouse. This building doesn't serve the public good. It serves Karen's delusion." There were gasps. Someone started clapping. Karen's face went sheet white, then blazing red. She slammed her gavel. "This meeting is adjourned," she shouted. And that's when the fire alarm went off. A sharp, piercing scream of a thing. Everyone froze. Then someone yelled, "Smoke!" and all hell broke loose. People scrambled to the exits. Steve, the former treasurer, tripped over a stack of folding chairs. The ceiling tiles above the supply room turned dark with rising smoke. And then came the smell: burning plastic, scorched paper, and something else. Something rotten. The fire department arrived in 6 minutes. By then, flames had already licked their way up the rear file cabinets and into the ceiling tiles. No one was hurt, well, except Karen's legacy. You see, the fire didn't just destroy a few chairs and some binders. No, the heat popped open a false panel in the back wall, revealing a hidden storage cavity. Inside, boxes of old documents, unreported expenditures, secret correspondence, years of Karen's private HOA fiefdom scribbled in handwritten memos and credit card statements, and sitting on top, perfectly preserved in a fireproof pouch, a thumb drive labeled Board Reimbursements, Confidential. Within hours, investigators were on site. The county fire marshal declared the fire suspicious. The police, having responded to over a dozen HOA complaints in the last year, were more than happy to investigate, and when they opened the drive, jackpot. Hundreds of transactions from HOA accounts routed through shell contractors tied to Karen's family, landscaping jobs billed 3 times, office renovations that never occurred, conference reimbursements for trips to destinations that looked suspiciously like luxury resorts. The press caught wind. Local media dubbed it the bonfire of the vanities. Karen's photo, shocked, smoke-streaked, and mascara-streaked, ran front page on the Sunday edition. HOA under fire, literally and legally. By the end of the week, subpoenas were issued. Karen was questioned by police. Margaret turned state's witness. Steve resigned and left town. And the final nail? The county commissioner formally dissolved the Sunrise Oaks Homeowners Association under municipal authority. That's right. They disbanded the entire HOA. The power Karen craved, the community she lorded over, the little empire of fees and fines and font-approved signage, it was gone, just like that. And the building? With the fire damage and legal entanglements, no one wanted it. The county offered it to me for a song. I bought it in cash. And then, I announced the final move, the one they never saw coming. I donated it to a homeless shelter. Yep. The Sunrise Oaks HOA office, Karen's pride and joy, the glass and stone ego shrine where she drank Earl Grey and lectured neighbors about garbage bin etiquette, was now Hope Station, a drop-in center for veterans and displaced families. I installed a mural on the outer wall, a painted depiction of a neighborhood street where people smiled, shared meals, and waved to each other, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Above it, in bold letters, community isn't ruled, it's built. And here's the kicker. Due to rezoning laws and a twist of brutal irony, the shelter offers subsidized housing units, income-based. And who was first in line after losing her home to legal fees, mounting debt, and a foreclosure tied to that pesky unpaid land lease? Karen Mitchell. I saw her name on the applicant list, verified it twice. She sat in the waiting room, eyes hollow, clutching a clipboard that didn't have any fines on it, just a housing questionnaire. When she looked up and saw me walking by in my work boots and flannel, she didn't say a word. Neither did I, but I nodded, just once. Let me tell you something. Revenge doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives in silence, in paperwork, in quiet dignity and patience that outlast petty tyranny. And sometimes poetic justice smells like stale carpet and burned upholstery in a room that used to be a kingdom. Karen once said the HOA wasn't just a governing body, it was the soul of Sunrise Oaks. Well, maybe it was. But now? Now the only soul left in this place is the one rebuilding it without her.